about you? Where are you
You,
located?
I'm in Canada.
Ooh, right on.
Yeah, very close to Niagara Falls, about 15 minutes from the falls,
Ooh,
north of the Rainbow Bridge.
that sounds beautiful.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's very nice here.
Right on. Are
Yeah.
you originally from Canada?
Well, I was born and brought up in India,
Okay,
and then our family moved to Canada in 1976.
right on.
So this has been home ever since then.
Awesome. So if you don't mind me asking, how come not America? Why Canada?
Oh, I think it just worked out that my dad had an opportunity to come to Canada. He had an old high school friend of his that was already here.
Cool.
And then my dad was a pastor in India at the time, and he said, "Hey, have you ever considered pastoring outside of India? Because I can find you an opening here." And so dad came, and we didn't think it was going to be a permanent arrangement. He just wanted to come and see what it was like. And then
Mm,
a year later, the rest of us came, and then we just liked living here, so never went back to live in India, although go back for visits and so on.
very cool. You like it out there?
Very much so. Yeah,
Right
yeah.
on.
It's a
Right on.
very um, like the city we live in. It's not quite like a metropolitan Toronto, which would be very busy and bustling.
Okay.
And so our city is about 140,000 people, and we're like 90 minutes from Buffalo Airport. It's about 60 minutes from the Toronto Airport. It's a very central location, so we love it. And
Right
it's
on.
wine country, so it's very beautiful in the summer. A lot of vineyards
Wow.
and also orchards, fruit trees. Yeah,
Very cool.
yeah.
Yeah. So how do you properly say your name? Is it Jeeva?
Yeah, Jiva. Yeah,
Jeeva, right on. Okay.
yeah.
Well, Jeeva, it's so nice to officially meet you. I'm super excited to finally get to talk to you. I know we've been back and forth on Podmatch. So if we finally get to
Yes.
do this. But as I was looking at your profile, I would love to talk about marriage with you today. As
Okay.
a man who's been married for almost 1 year, will be 1 year in June. Praise
Okay.
Jesus. So my first question for you today is why marriage? Why have such an interest in talking about marriage?
Okay. Well, I think part of it is because of where God had led us. Like I never intended, intentionally to do anything with marriage at all.
Yeah.
But what happened was in 2009, 2010, there was a very popular movie called Fireproof
Okay.
among Christian circles about a firefighter whose marriage was tanking. And his father-in-law gives him something called the Love Dare and asks him to like go through all the 40 days of the Love Dare. And by the time, he put some of them into practice, eventually, his wife changes her mind about leaving him and they get back together. Well, there's a Canadian Christian television station that said, "Hey, this is a great thing that we need to introduce to our audience. But rather than just, promote the book and what's in it, how about we make it a little bit more interactive by inviting three couples to actually go through the 40 days and
Mm,
then do a vlog, a video blog at the end of each day." And so we got invited to be one of those couples. At that time, Sloj and I had been married for 26 years.
mm,
And so the other couples were a little bit less than us. One of them was actually fairly new, maybe 4 years into marriage. And so we did that. And as we were doing that, people kept on writing to us and saying, "Hey, I got this thing in my marriage. My husband is this, my wife's not. Can you help us?" And it's like, no, that's not what we came on the show for.
mm.
We don't have any qualifications anyway.
Yeah.
But my wife said, "You know what? I think God is calling us to some kind of marriage ministry."
Mm,
And I'm like, "I don't think so.
right.
I'm I've been a pastor for 25 years. I've worked with married couples at the point of, in distress. And I said, "Suppose let's not go there because they'll suck the life out of you." And so she she very wisely backed off, didn't press me into it. But the seeds of what we're doing today, were really born, or sowed rather at that point. And then along the way, maybe a few years down the road, I started mentoring some Christian guys in the marketplace who wanted some prayer support and prophetic input and that kind of stuff. And so they were following what I was teaching them, just biblical principles, achieving, like great success, doubling their businesses and that type of thing. And then they all hit a plateau. And I'm really puzzled because they're doing all the right things and not moving forward. So in my quiet time, one day I'm just saying, "Okay, Holy Spirit, what's going on here?" And so I just got this very quick message from him saying, ask them all about their marriage. And when I talked to each of the guys individually about their marriage, they all had issues at home.
Wow.
There was friction, there was lack of unity, and sometimes tension. So it's like, okay, when there's no unity in the home, then it affects the flow of blessing into your life.
Wow.
So again, I'm just going to keep the story short. So just a few months after that, I finally came to the conclusion that this is something God is calling us to do, and so that's how we really got into this whole area of what we call marriage mentorship.
Mm.
Wrote a book out of that, and that's kind of our main jam these days.
Yeah, man. Well, Jiva, that's so beautiful because as a married man, I think people who minister in marriage it's a very beautiful thing. Because I was actually talking to some friends yesterday. I'm in ministry as well. I pastor a young adults group, and if we're talking about family, quote unquote, marriage comes before ministry, right?
Yes.
And so my thought, and I made the statement is, if my marriage isn't great, if my home life isn't great with my wife, then my ministry can't be healthy. So my marriage
Yeah.
has to be healthy as well.
Hmm.
And so I guess my first question too is, how do you balance that between if you are in ministry and even if you're not in ministry, because the show is for believers and non-believers, how can
Yeah.
we as men or women balance our quote unquote work life or ministry life with our spouse?
Yeah. Well, one of the dangers of being in full-time ministry and ordained ministry or having some kind of a responsibility for pastoring or overseeing a ministry and so on is without even realizing it, you end up being married to the church or to your ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because you're so passionate about what you do, I mean,
Yeah.
I think hardly anybody looks at serving as a pastor or minister as an occupation or a
Right.
profession. It's a calling,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so you throw yourself heart and soul into it. And sometimes, what that means is you end up spending a lot more time with people in the church, because of their needs and so on, especially if there's somebody that runs into some situation, that it's very easy to really, give your marriage, your family short shrift. And I did that, at a
Mm-hmm.
certain stage in my earlier stage, I should say, in my marriage and ministry. It's, like Slojana was basically raising the children on her own. And I honestly didn't even realize what I was doing until one of the members of my overseeing group within the church kind of called me on it
Mm-hmm.
and said, "Hey, we talked to your wife, and you hardly spend any time at home." And it's like, well, I got to do all these things. And they said, "Listen, stop feeling guilty about not doing enough things in the church.
Wow. Yeah.
Like, focus on your family, because like our children are young, you'll never get to live this age with them again."
Yeah.
And so don't be, and I noticed I realized at that point that a lot of my motivation was guilt,
Mm.
and kind of pleasing the congregation, all this kind of stuff was in there. And so one of the first steps I took was to intentionally set aside, well, we started with half a day, just for me and Sloja.
Mm-hmm.
And she was a stay-at-home mom at the time, so it was easy for us to make that time during the day. So like no phone calls, no appointments that had to do with
Yeah. Yeah.
ministry,
Yeah.
and so on. But you have to jealously guard it. Otherwise, you can actually fool yourself into believing that you are actually doing the right thing. And I would say, like, what does it profit a man, to gain the world and lose his marriage?
Right.
Like it
Man.
just, and sadly, we've seen many examples of even some of the highest profile ministers who have fallen into that trap.
Mm.
And I think Benny Hinn actually made an astounding statement. He said, "I put my ministry before my marriage and paid the price."
Mm.
So it takes intentionality, to be able to do that. And one of the best ways in which you do that is to set aside definite parcels of time, uninterrupted time, minimum like a three-hour stretch, just to be with your spouse and let them know that, hey, yes, I'm serving God. Jesus is first in my life,
Mm-hmm.
but you hold second place.
Well, yeah.
And in my life on earth, you are the number one person in my life. And how can I make that even more clear to you? And for some wives, spending time together like that may not be the answer. They may want something else to do something else.
Yeah.
But to make that a priority. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, see, I kind of I learned that by just from experience. So when we started doing a life together, me and my wife came back from our honeymoon. We kind of fell into our normal schedules. Me serving at the church, and she would stay home. And then I realized I wasn't home as much as I would like to because of after hour things that had to happen. And
Hmm.
so me and her had a discussion about me um, being home more. And so praise God that my pastors are very understanding. It's like, hey, like I probably can't serve as much as I'd like to because I want to be home with my wife and I want to be able to be with her. And two, I've grown to be more intentional in areas where ministry isn't happening. For example, in the morning time.
Hmm.
So I'll wake up, I'll get ready, and then I'll just hang out with her while she's getting ready. So I'll hang out with her in the
Yeah.
bathroom. Well, me and her will kind of sit in the kitchen and talk as we're making our lunches together. So we're really more intentional with our time together, especially if I know, for example, Thursdays we have our young adults group. On Thursdays, I'm even more intentional because I know I'm going to be coming home a little bit later
Hmm.
than usual.
Yeah.
So intentionality is so important, and so that's something that I've learned in my marriage.
Well, congratulations, Brandon,
Thank
because
you. Yeah,
like most of us don't learn that lesson until, either there's at least a stress point,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
hopefully not a breaking point, but quite often, I mean, I had the reality check that needed to happen. And so, because I was heading towards burnout,
Mm,
and thankfully, people who were in my ministry circles picked
hmm.
up on that. I was too young to notice and naive to notice,
Yeah.
but somebody noticed and called me on it.
Wow. Yeah, so maybe um spouses aren't really intentional because maybe their love for their other spouse is kind of burnt out or their passion for the other spouse isn't there. So how can we keep the passion there for our spouse? Being married for 20 something years, being married for 30 years, or even me, I'm going to be married for a year. How can I keep the passion going for another year of marriage?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you always have to remember is your first love, and by that I mean what really drew you,
Hmm.
to your spouse.
Yeah.
What did you find like really attractive about them, and not just physically, but emotionally. Where was the connection the strongest, for you, and that can vary from couple to couple. And so one of the things that we always want to do is to make sure that we are strengthening that connection. We keep
Hmm.
that going. So, for example, like some couples, like really want the word that we often hear is romance. Like we want to keep the romance going in our
Yeah.
marriage. And so, what does that mean? Well, for some people, it may still mean romantic, candlelight and and wine dinners, that type of thing. For some, romantic simply means, hey, just be with me. Let's go for a walk together. Let's even watch like a movie or a TV show together. And to me, part of the passion, keeping the passion going, excuse me, is really a lot of communication.
Mm,
I think even when you talk about silly things
yeah.
together, that strengthens your marriage more than just always like sitting down and say, well, what are the top three things you would like to do this year? Like,
Mm,
not in a
totally.
kind of like in a questioning or quizzing somebody about what's going on, what they want to do, but just like doing, like, for example, like Slogan and I, we didn't do this right away, but later on in life, we decided, no, we got to do something fun together. And neither of us is very athletic.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, she used to be athletic in her younger days, but we were not really quite inclined to, go and do something, strenuous, rock climbing or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so, or even bowling, once in a while it's fine. And so we decided, and we live in Canada, and so winter times here, there's a limitation to how much you can do outside.
Hmm.
And so we just thought, why don't we, get ourselves a jigsaw puzzle and start working on it together. And we knew that we'd probably make time to do it once a week.
Hmm.
Excuse me, it'll take a few weeks before we could finish it up. Like 300 pieces, 500 pieces, whatever. And so we just found like that was one of the best decisions we ever made,
Wow.
because in the course of finding those pieces, there's some gentle teasing going on, and it's not It's not something that occupies your brain too much. So
Yeah,
you can
yeah,
talk
yeah.
about other things, even as your hands are, your eyes are looking at this and you find those places. So finding some things to do that'll keep you together
Hmm.
in a leisurely way. And also I would say like when you sense something in your spouse that is not, maybe they don't seem quite, like full on, maybe they're a little bit off. You can tell that something's bothering them. Like rather than ignore those signals, to confront them boldly and say, "Hey, honey, I'm just noticing you're not quite, yourself
Hmm.
the last couple of days. Like, can you tell me what's going on?" And identify those things, because more often than not, the passion goes off or goes out because you're not alert to those signals, or you see the signals, but you choose not to act on them.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I want to go back to you talking about doing something with your spouse. Um, and I haven't really run into this issue, but I feel like maybe someone has. How can we, let's say your wife or my wife loves to do something that we're not really interested in. How can we humble ourselves and do that thing with her, even though that we don't enjoy it?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, it's a very good, great question, because, and also a very real question for me, because when she first suggested doing jigsaw puzzles, I'm like, oh no.
Yeah, yeah,
The only reason I agreed to it is because it's something that would give me time with her.
yeah.
And so um, so what was, so I went, it's like, okay, if that's something that you want to do, then we will do it. But we also have other things that I enjoy doing more.
Hmm.
That then she comes along with me. She agrees to do those things with me, and
Very good.
so I think there's compromises sometimes that you need to make. One of the things we recommend, couples in our marriage mentorship process is, quite often time becomes an issue. Where we don't have time for, to do both. Well, if you can work it out that you both, set aside this one parcel of time to be together, and another time that you go do your own thing.
Hmm.
So in the Canadian context, like guys like to play hockey in the
Hmm.
winter time, or there's another game, curling, that they like to do. Well, ladies quite often, the ones that want to do something, they would either do some like something like bowling that is not that strenuous, or a lot of times the ladies love to hang around, with their girlfriends,
Yeah.
and just get together, have a little kind of a chit chat type of thing. And so if you could structure it in such a way that the night that I'm out playing hockey, Slojana does her thing,
Hmm.
whether it's with her friends, or she, gets part of a bowling league or something like that, then you don't have to give up what you love to do altogether,
Mm.
but you just find a way that you do what you like to do. It's a matter of spending time apart from each other to pursue the things that you like to do. And that will be an easier thing to work into your marriage, and an easy sell in some ways, if you first have made the decision to do something together.
Mm.
Like one of the things this shows up in Brandon, and you'll run into it a little bit later on in your life as you go along, is vacations.
Hmm.
Where do we want to go? And again, our different interests, come into
Yeah.
the forefront. Somebody wants to go, and they just want to, hike to the top of the mountain, and the other one's like, no, I'd rather lie on the beach.
Right.
Okay. So you find ways to make it work, and maybe, compromises. This year we're going to go hike on the mountains, and next year we'll go to the beach.
Yeah.
So there's ways that you can work it out where you may do something that your heart may not be totally into it, but with the puzzles, like I'm enjoying them now, even though in the beginning I was very reluctant, and mainly because you realize the time you spend with each other is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And so even though the activity may not be the most pleasing or intellectually stimulating one,
Yeah.
the point is you're together as a couple.
Yeah. What's blessed me, Jiva, this past year is whenever my wife is doing something that I'm not really interested in, one, doing those things with her, um, has blessed me because I just watch my wife. I watch my wife observe. She loves plants. I watch my wife observe the plants. I watch her talk to the plants. I watch her do her thing, and it just makes me fall in love with her more and more because I don't do that. And I just find it amazing how she absolutely loves it. And of course, I don't know if you've run into this issue, but we go to the store and we are intending to go for groceries. And then, so as you walk in the store, the groceries are on the left, clothes are on the right. And then my wife just rears off to the right and she just starts
Yeah.
looking at stuff because there's a new deal. And I'm like, babe, we're here for groceries. And she's like, oh, let me just look real quick. And then we spend the next 45 minutes looking at clothes. Um, but it's a joy to me because I just love watching her do her thing. And me and my wife have really healthy boundaries, in my opinion, about guy time and girl time,
Yeah.
because we are not with um, our friends often. Now, I'm not saying like we never see our friends, but we have a healthy balance between, hey, so my buddy's going to be having an open night because his wife is busy. Do you mind if I go over? Absolutely.
Hmm.
And so that's when communication comes in. And
Yes. Very
I'm
much
very
so.
passionate about communication,
Yeah.
because you can communicate something, but that doesn't mean you're not getting the point across.
Yeah.
You have to use your words wisely. For example, like, can you go grab that over there? I have no idea what you're asking me. You're asking me to grab something, but what do you want me to grab? Rather than, hey, can you go grab the spoon off the table? So you have to
Yeah.
be a little bit more specific.
Yeah.
Um, and so, besides communication, what are some things that you see or the biggest issues in marriages that kind of cause division? I know finances was a big problem. I've heard recently new studies talks about pornography is a really big issue. So what are some things that from your experience have you seen that really hinder a marriage or even break up a marriage?
Okay. Yeah. Well, a lot of it is the patterns that you get into. And quite often those are patterns that you bring into your marriage,
Mm,
from your life as a single, or sometimes people have had a relationship that they were really vested in before. And so there are certain ways that they were used to doing things. And so they bring those expectations into the marriage, or those patterns. And some of those patterns, if those patterns are healthy, for example, if the communication patterns are healthy patterns, we're
mm,
always, checking with each other, asking those questions and so on, then that's great. But if the communication pattern is not healthy, where, one person loves to talk and wants to get it all out, and most often the women are that way, and the guys, just like you don't engage,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and you think it's normal.
yeah.
Then all of a sudden, one day your wife says to you, all these years I've been trying to talk to you, and you just grunt,
Hmm.
like what's going on here? I don't know what you're thinking. Like, in other words, it's a pattern, that you
Yeah.
get into. So, and those patterns can be in any area. So, for example, you mentioned finances as a cause of, stress that often ends up, it can get people to the breaking point if it's not handled properly.
Hmm.
And when you kind of peel off the layers, you find out that the issue is not really money. The issue is the patterns that you have learned about how to handle money, and lack of communication. Like,
Mm,
this is something that we faced in our marriage at
hmm.
a certain stage, because I was in Canada already before Slojana joined me here. Then I was used to handling like all the accounts and pay the bills and all the kind of stuff. And she didn't really have an interest in it. She's like, he's taking care of it. That's fine. I don't have to worry about it. The only thing was, at a certain stage, I was doing some sideline projects and stuff. And so I started using up our credit cards and really maxing them out.
Mm,
And so, like, there was nothing, illegal, immoral, improper about what I was doing. It's just stuff that, like, I just didn't restrain myself enough. Or sometimes, it's in the hope of, one of my friends used to call it the if come.
hmm.
You spend all this, and if I do this, then that money will come.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so, yeah, yeah. So in that hope of like leveraging, but like way over my head with it. And
Mm,
so when that happened, and because I had not brought her on board, made her aware of these things as we go along, all of a sudden, when it came time to pay the piper, all these collection agencies keep calling and stuff. And back in the days when we each didn't have our own cell phones, when we didn't have any cell phones, when there was only one phone on the wall for the home,
yeah.
then she ended up having to field some of those calls. And it's like, hey, Chiba, what's going on here?
Hmm.
I got a call from this bank and this bank and this guy, and so on. And so at that point, so really, if she said to me afterwards, why did you tell me about this earlier? Well, I thought you'd get mad. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yes, I would have got mad, but together we would have found a way to stop this pattern. Like,
Yeah.
like because, yeah, but because you didn't keep me informed about it, then now, it's the same thing with something like pornography, where, when your spouse finds out about it, then usually that can lead to a breaking point.
Yep.
Like we actually had a couple come one time where it was not pornography, but it was some other sexual, impropriety that he had been committing. And when she caught him, like she was so upset, she immediately like packed her bags, packed the kids, and just left because it was just devastating.
Mhm.
And if he had at some stage earlier said, honey, I'm having a little issue here with something, and I know you may not, you probably can't help me, but I want to go and get some help with it. So quite often, again, you trace it back, and it's something that you haven't communicated with your spouse. Quite often, well, two reasons. One is like exactly what I said to Slojana. If I said that to you, if I shared this with you, you would have gotten mad. And
Mhm.
I'm not ready to. I'm not equipped. I didn't have a game plan, a healthy pattern to deal with conflict, and neither did she. So we would just deal with it the way that we maybe saw our parents deal with it,
Yeah.
and now it causes even more problems. But really, if you went into marriage, and this is a point that we've been hammering away lately with couples, if you go into marriage prepared to face the realities of marriage, if you
Mm.
go into marriage, before you get married,
That's
have a
good.
game plan for handling your finances.
Yeah.
Have some tools in a toolkit that'll help you to resolve conflict. Learn
Yeah.
some good, healthy communication patterns, both together, and then you start applying them in your marriage. Like, you're setting yourself up for a much more, pleasant and fulfilling marriage
Mm.
than if you didn't.
Yeah. That's really good. Communication is key, and that's like one of the biggest things I'm really passionate about is communication. I saw in your profile talking about arranged marriages.
Hmm.
Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I'm just really curious. Um, what you I don't forgot what specifically you said on your profile. I think you said they're a good thing, or I don't really know. I don't remember.
Well, I'm from India, and so in
Yeah.
the Indian culture, arranged marriages are the norm.
Yeah.
Excuse me, an arranged marriage simply means, your parents will basically go looking for a spouse for you, and
Yeah.
like they do the background checks. They assess more of your. I'm going to use the word compatibility,
Hmm.
but not in terms of personal compatibility, but more in terms of family compatibility, more in terms of like your status in society and so on.
Hmm.
Those are more important values because like if it were up to us to pick someone to be your life partner, we don't take those things into consideration. We're
Hmm.
more focused on that person's, looks or personality or, income, the choice they have, all this kind of stuff. So, so in that context, my parents and Sloja's parents, they worked with a marriage broker. And the broker,
Wow.
just like a real estate broker brings
Yeah.
buyers and sellers together, this broker has a list of parents looking for a husband for their daughters, and another list of parents looking for a wife for their sons.
Wow.
And so, he goes through the list and he says, I think these two would be a good match. And then he brings it to the parents and says, what do you think? So then quite often the parents will have a meeting on their own and talk some things over. And of course, like in India, still the dowry system is in effect. So they will work out some of those details of what kind of dowry can we expect and so on. And once they are satisfied at that point, that's when the actual two people who are getting married get to connect, get to meet. In the old days, a lot of times people never even met each other. They just trusted their parents' judgment so much that the first time they would actually see each other, they would have seen pictures of each other, but see each other in person would be on their wedding day.
Wow.
So
Wow. Wow. Wow.
I know I'm blowing your mind, right?
It's crazy. Yeah. Because I knew about arranged marriages, but I'm curious, like, do you think, like, if America did that, do you think America would be in a better position when it comes to marriage? Do you think marriages would probably be a little bit worse because it's two strangers? Like, do you have any opinion on that?
Well, one way to come at it is to look at the statistics. So in America, Canada, generally speaking, in the Western world, the divorce rate is around 50%.
Yeah.
Some will say a little bit less, some would say a little bit more. So it's virtually one out of every two marriages, unfortunately ends up in divorce. In India, the divorce rate is under 10%.
Wow. That is crazy.
Yeah, yeah. And so, in other words, so you have to ask the question, like, what is it that actually makes a marriage work, last, be successful, whatever? Um, Very clearly, the fact that you got to know somebody for a number of years or months or whatever it is ahead of time is not the make or break factor.
Mm,
Like that's one thing that arranged marriages very clearly tell us. So whether your marriage is arranged, by the two of you, or by your parents, or by some matrimonial site or whatever, how you end up making that decision is what you do when you're together. Once you're
mm,
together, that really makes a difference.
yeah.
And so, like one of the things we say in our book is, we sometimes sweat so much over like finding the right person to marry that really what we need to be looking at is how can I be the right person for the one I married?
Yeah.
And that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how you were brought together in marriage. That has to be, what will ultimately determine, whether your marriage makes it or not. And so the one thing I would say about arranged marriages that I believe we in North America can really learn from is to realize that we all have blind spots, and sometimes we get caught up in this romantic haze that I talked about earlier, or some other aspect of someone's life can blind us to their character. A lot of times, like
Yeah.
charisma gets a lot more attention than character. And so when you subject yourself and the person that you're considering marrying to the scrutiny of what I would call quote unquote elders in your life,
Mm,
which of course, would be your parents. If you're a Christian, it could be your pastor, or somebody else that knows you well and really has no vested interest in this relationship. In other words, they won't take sides. They just
mhm.
look at the two of you and say, hey, we've seen the way you interact. And like I kind of picked this up with the way that she retorted when you brought something up, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
People outside of your circles will often pick up on things that you don't pick up because you too caught up in it, or you may have already made a decision and now you're doing everything possible to justify the decision that this is the person you're going to marry. I'll give you one of the statements that we've heard repeatedly
Mhm.
from couples that come to us at the point of breaking up is something along the lines of, well, I did see some red flags, but I thought, once we're married, those
It'll
won't
go
be
away.
issues.
Ooh,
Yeah.
yeah. I've heard that too.
Yeah. Or I'll tell you what's even worse. Yeah, I noticed that, but I was pretty sure that once we got married, I'd change him. He'd
Mm,
start seeing things my way.
mm.
And it's like, ain't happening.
Wrongo. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where, like, and quite often, like in our case, we have three children, all married now. Our two sons, like, lived with us for quite some time. Our daughter had moved out. She was older than the other ones and was on her own outside of our country for a while and even out of our state or province. And so we didn't have the same interaction with her, but with the boys, because the girls that they were getting serious about were close enough, we got to see them
Hmm.
together. And then afterwards the boys would, came to us and said, what do you think?
Yeah.
Like, do you think this particular girl, she's a good match for me? And also we'd have those conversations, and they chose wisely as well, I mean, all sorts of stuff
Yeah. Yeah.
behind
Yeah.
that. However, that would be like, to me, a really good step in the right direction. And also the other thing that I think we in America can learn more, and we as young adults, like your age and so on, need to realize, which people in India have, is that they have a very strong support system socially and within
Mm.
their family.
Wow.
So your family is basically there to support you in your marriage.
Cool.
So you can freely talk to somebody about what's going on. It may not be your parent. Sometimes it's as an auntie or an uncle that you can confide in, who will give you their wisdom.
Hmm.
Here, I think quite often, we tend to keep things to ourselves.
Hmm.
We're not openly sharing with other people. I mean, you may be sharing with some buddies, when you're having a drink at the bar or something, but that's nothing much is going to come of that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so, yeah, but to have someone like that built in, and I personally feel, Brandon, that the church can be the community for many of us in North America.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because our families, unfortunately, many young adults these days getting married come from broken families, and there's all sorts of other dynamics that they may not see their family as a safe place to do that. But
Hmm.
what if we could provide them with like another couple who's like a marriage mentor, that
Hmm.
they can stay accountable to, meet with regularly, and basically alert them when something's not quite right and get some help.
Hmm.
Then we could probably avoid a lot of heartache down the road where things escalate simply because they're not taken care of early enough.
Mm. With arranged marriages, I'm really curious. Do you ever see, or like I don't know if you know the statistic of seeing this where um the marriage goes through, but then the husband turns out to be like the opposite of what was told, like he's actually not the best person, or vice versa, like the woman is not the best. Like, do you ever see that?
Oh, yeah. Like we've seen that happen. That's not that long ago. We heard a bit of a horror story about
Mm,
what was portrayed. It doesn't happen a lot anymore because, like
mm,
in my day, like we've been married for 40 years. So in those days, we didn't have the internet.
yeah.
We didn't have the kind of ease of communication, where you could check up on people. Like even to this day, every once in a while, somebody will send us emails saying, "Hey, I don't know if you remember me. We're from the same hometown. Blah blah blah. There's a proposal. That's the word they often use. That has come for my daughter, and the boy, is in Toronto, not that far from you, or they're somewhere in Canada. Is there some way that you can, find out something about this person? Like sometimes you can even lie about a
Mm,
job that somebody has overseas.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But so people, who can make those kind of inquiries and verify, what it is. But person's character, people can be a real charmer when they meet, when they talk on the phone with each other or
Right.
whatever, or FaceTime, and then turn out to be different. But I mean that happens, in marriages here as well, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Where,
yeah.
oh well, gee, who did I marry? The person I married is not the person I was dating,
Yeah.
and so yeah, yeah.
It's quite interesting. So this is my biggest question. I wanted to save it for the end. Um, so people who aren't Christians, people who aren't believers, I've seen some amazing marriages and they don't believe in the Lord. And so
Hmm.
if someone were to come to you and you were, I don't know if convince is the right word, but how can you communicate to someone who's not a believer that the Lord can make quote unquote your marriage better? Or if someone looks at a marriage and they're Christians and it's not the best and they're non-believers and their marriage is great, how can you convince them? It's like, hey, like the Lord is something that you need in your life.
Yeah.
Um, rather than like, oh, I don't need like the Lord because my marriage is great. And I know that's a little prideful, but what would you say to that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first of all, a lot of people realize their need for the Lord in their
Hmm.
lives as well as in
Yeah.
the marriage when they hit a crisis.
Hmm.
And sometimes, it's only at that point they begin to realize we can't do this on our own.
Yeah.
We need supernatural, help, power from beyond us. And that's why even like often non-believers will say, will not be opposed to you praying for them because they
Hmm.
know there's something there.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we, that's funny is that yesterday we had this very similar conversation yesterday with somebody, and we're basically saying if when you build your marriage on a strong foundation, and that foundation needs to be built, of course in our experience on Jesus, then even when something else gets shaky in your life, even when a storm blows or whatever, if your foundation is strong, then and the foundation is stable, foundation can be relied on,
Hmm.
and then your chances of weathering that, are way higher when you base your marriage, your relationship just on the strength of your love. And if it, especially if it's like a romantic love, something that's based more on attraction,
Yeah.
then when those things start to fade,
Right.
then what is the constant?
Hmm.
And I'm not saying that somebody, who doesn't believe in the Lord cannot have that, which again, I totally agree with you. I've seen those marriages as well. But wouldn't it be better, to have that strength that is available to you all the time?
Yeah.
So you're not trying to do everything on your own strength, especially when both of you now rely on the Lord. Like to me,
Hmm.
like there's a power, there's a strength that is released there. Like even something as simple as a couple praying together in agreement, and Matthew 18:19 kicks in, that whatever they ask for shall be done for you by my Father in heaven. Well, there are benefits, there are blessings that will come to you when you have, Jesus as the one that holds you together, and not just something that you have built, which has the potential to crumble.
Yeah.
Whereas, he will always be there for you.
That's so good because what I would say too is like Jesus is the only one that gets and touches our soul, right? So
Hmm.
if our kid gets sick, money can't fix that. If our
Yeah,
marriage is falling apart, money can't fix that. There is only
yeah,
one person
yeah,
who can fix that, and that's Jesus.
yeah,
And so having a marriage that's built on a firm foundation is absolutely one of the best things that you can do.
yeah,
And because like you said, even if they're having a really good marriage, they're going to run into a crisis. Something's
yeah,
going to happen.
yeah,
And then it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do right now.
yeah,
They're going to get a phone call from a doctor. It's like your kid has cancer or you have cancer, or um, they find out that their spouse was uh, doing something bad with their money and all their money's gone.
yeah,
It's like, oh my gosh, like what am I
yeah.
going to do? And so that is when Jesus comes in. And I really, really love that. But I'm really curious. So what is the major religion where you come from in India?
Hinduism.
Hinduism. So
Yeah.
did you practice Hinduism? Like, how did you become a Christian?
Oh, so I'm actually a third generation pastor.
Oh, cool.
So my great grandfather was the first one that converted from Hinduism to Christianity.
Okay.
Of course, he endured a lot of persecution and ostracization, ostracization. Blah, blah, blah. He was, basically, isolated, from his community.
Mm.
They disowned him and so on. Um, and it was due because of missionaries that came, to our part of India, and they
Wow.
established schools and hospitals, and then out of those, eventually came churches.
Hmm. Wow. Do you know the biggest difference between Hinduism and Christians? Like in order of
Well,
beliefs?
yeah, at a philosophical level, Hindus will also say they believe in one God, but they believe and they worship many manifestations of what they would call God. So, for
Okay.
example, the city that I grew up in had a temple that was like all snakes, like statues of like little images of
Whoa.
snakes. There were even live snakes inside the temple, and people would go and do these religious rites to some of these stone snakes that were sitting out there,
Wow.
because they believe that like God is in the snakes as well. And
Wow.
so and at a very liberal level of Hinduism, they'll be very, very accepting of any faith.
Hmm.
Like we actually went to a Hindu temple one time where there were some statues of the Hindu gods, and there was also a Mother Mary, and
Wow.
there was a picture of Jesus all in there.
Yeah.
They didn't, yeah. Now the people who are devout Hindus would never go for that. They would not make room for any other faiths to
Hmm.
come in there. Sadly, that's the case in India right now in certain parts where Christians are experiencing a lot of persecution because of that very strongly held belief that there's no room for anything else. And as a matter of fact, some of them are saying right now that India is really meant to be a Hindu country, and
Hmm.
so we shouldn't have make room for anybody of any other faith.
Wow.
So there's that. But really, the thing is, if they do even acknowledge Jesus as a religious figure, that's basically it.
Mm.
The designations that we use for Jesus, Lord and Savior, would be totally unacceptable.
Wow. That is very interesting. So I'm going through this season of my life where I'm not like I would say I'm dabbling in what other religions believe, and because I'm just so curious, right? Because there's just so much out there. And if someone were to come to me and say, um, if Hindus believe this or other religions believe this, why is Christianity the right
Yeah.
way, right?
Yeah.
And so
Hmm.
it's a beautiful journey to kind of
Yeah.
figure out how to answer those questions, and it's kind
Yeah.
of cool just to learn about other religions.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really cool.
A fairly small book that does a really good job of asking these questions is one by Ravi Zacharias called Jesus Among Other Gods.
Cool.
And I know, Ravi fell into some disrepute uh,
Yeah.
towards the end of his life.
Yeah.
But he does a masterful job of actually even stating, like if very concisely, what the belief systems are of some of the major religions
Mm,
of the world and how Christianity differs from them, and how you can even answer some of these questions that people ask about, well, this is what my faith says. How can you say that yours is this, blah, blah, blah. So
yeah.
that's a great resource I would recommend.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. Well, thank you so much for your time, Jiva. I received a lot from you. I definitely would love to have you on again. I loved our conversation. I love how gentle you are. I love how sincere you are. And just by this 45-minute conversation, I can tell you are an amazing man of God. And so I just want to say thank you for what you're doing. And I know that for sure you have ministered to so many people. I know that your harvest is going to be huge. And I'm so thankful for this friendship that has been birthed. And I can't wait to have you on in the show. And I would love to work something out in the future, maybe to host you on in person, because you are you're just amazing, and I love your character. I love your spirit. So thank you so much for being on the show, man. And I'll definitely keep in
Yeah.
touch. So thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah, you're welcome, Brandon. I thank you for the opportunity, to connect with you. And I'll just say this in closing because of the assignment that God's placed on your life
Mm,
is that one of the pastors actually told me this. He read through our book, just the outline of the book actually, and he said to me, "You know what you guys are actually doing in your marriage mentorship?" I said, "What?" He said, "You're discipling couples."
mm,
And he said, in the church, we really suck at doing that, is what he said.
yeah.
Like we have youth, young adults, children, seniors, but we don't have any discipling for couples.
Mm,
We may have fellowship groups. And so I'd throw that out as a challenge to you as a young adult pastor. I mean, not all of young adults are married, uh,
yeah.
but but with your pastors, ask the question, how can we disciple our couples
Mm,
so that their marriages, do end up staying together as one flesh till
that's so
death do
good.
them part.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, Jiva, thank you so much. I'll keep in touch with you. Okay.
All right. God bless.
Right. God
Bye.
bless. Bye bye.
Bye.